This is Beat the Closing Line.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Closing Line. Now, we have made it through the Super Bowl, but that doesn't mean that our talk about the NFL comes to an end. Today, we're going to be taking a look at betting on the NFL draft. I am your host, Nicole Russo, alongside our college betting analyst for thelines.com, Brett Gibbons. Brett, welcome to the show. This is my first time recording with you. How are you feeling about this year's draft class?
Well, if it's accurately scouted out, it's a loaded draft class, especially at receiver, pass rusher, a whole bunch of stuff. We have more elite quarterbacks after a year off, which is pretty great. It's exciting. Can't wait to kind of parse it out here.
Now, before we get into today's show, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know every time we post a video. Brett, let's talk about some general tips for betting on the NFL draft, because it's not always the case that the best player in your mind or who you think should be going first overall is actually going to go first overall. Now, you have to factor in the teams, who's picking first, what they need, trades, all of that. So give us a few general NFL draft betting tips before we get into some of the specific markets.
Yeah, number one, like you said, bet predictively. Don't bet based on your own assessment. If you look at some reputable draft sources like the Draft Network, I love the Draft Network, great source, check it out. They don't order their guys predictively. So you don't want to go to that board and be like, oh, okay, well, I see they ranked Michael Mayer 10th overall, so I'm betting him top 10. Well, don't do that. Always keep in mind, it has nothing to do with your eyes, your own personal evaluations of quarterbacks, even if you're, a former scouter or whatever's going on here. Always try to tie players to teams based on information. In the betting game, information is your best friend anyway, but especially in the NFL draft. It's not really so much analysis as it is kind of connecting the dots. And that's easier said than done, because 99% of the stuff is smoke, intentionally misleading information that's supposed to set other NFL teams off the trail of what a certain team wants to do, right? We see this all the time with like the 49ers back when they drafted Trey Lance. We had no idea where they were going, and there was a 1,000 reports. But kind of these late developing rumors like Quay Walker, linebacker last year, came up at like the very last hour, even before the draft, that, hey, he's going to get taken in the first round, and he did. So be sure to kind of separate what is and isn't true, and that's, a lot easier said than done, and we'll make mistakes along the way. But I'd also like to point out, don't underestimate Mel Kiper. We kind of look at him and be like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Yeah, well, he might not be the world's number one scout, but he knows more, and he's more plugged in than anybody else in the entire NFL world. So if he says that the player is way above consensus, a couple of names this year, Kalijah Cansey, defensive tackle for Pitt, Deonte Banks, Maryland corner. If he ranks those guys like way above consensus, don't just sweep that out as, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. No, that means he's hearing from NFL circles that these guys could be first-round picks. And we'll talk a whole lot more about that in depth later on. But just keep in mind, if you see kind of a red flag from Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, these kind of TV guys, they're very plugged in. So don't just dismiss it.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting what you said about these players having relationships with teams. And I think, I can't remember what podcast it was on, but Mahomes came out this year and basically said, I wanted to go to the Chiefs. And here's all the things that we basically did behind the scenes to make sure that I went to the Chiefs. So like you said, there are workings behind the scenes that we don't necessarily know about between the players and the coaching staff. So you might say, okay, Young's the best quarterback. Obviously, he's going to go first, overall, or first quarterback overall. That's not necessarily the case, because you do have to factor in the team that is picking in that spot.
Yeah, 100%. 75% of the draft process is evaluation, is combine, is Senior Bowl, is Shrine Bowl. But the other 25% of it is meetings and talking to these people, or talking to the prospects, coaches, GMs. Like, those personal relationships are so important, and that's something that we can't see. You can't go to team rankings and find a relationship index, right? That doesn't exist. So you're going to have to use your best judgment, kind of thread through Twitter. There's some very sharp people, some very plugged in people on Twitter. And also keep in mind, just in general, NFL draft betting is a very weak market, because odds makers, for once, are kind of in the same boat that we are. They may have some more trusted sources and get some of that in there, but they're just as susceptible to this smoke. We see it every single year of odds flying all over the place. Mac Jones, particularly with the 49ers going third overall, they're kind of in the same boat that we are, and it's a level playing field, so I see it as a weak market and something that is worth betting.
So let's go ahead and get into some of these markets. Now, right now, we're pretty early. There are only a few markets on the board. So if you're looking at NFL draft betting, don't be shocked by the amount of markets that you're seeing right now. Obviously, as we inch closer to the draft, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of different markets that you can bet on, especially when it comes to, there's a bunch. But right now, we're pretty limited. One of those is odds to go first overall that you can get right now. Now, sitting at the top of the board, we have Alabama quarterback Bryce Young at -130, followed by Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud at +250. Now, since the 2000 draft, there have been 16 quarterbacks drafted first overall, and it seems to be, based on the odds, trending again that way this year potentially. So talk us through this market, how you're betting it if you have already bet it, and some of these quarterbacks that we're seeing at the top of the board.
Yeah, a quarterback's almost certainly going to be first overall here. Chicago's on the board right now, but they're probably going to trade that away. There is some rumblings, I guess, that they may trade Justin Fields because he's not part of this new regime. I don't buy that at all. I think that they're going to trade the pick away to a team that needs a quarterback, of which there are many this year, and I think quarterbacks can go first overall. And if you look historically, dating back to 1997, every first overall pick has been a quarterback, it's been a pass rusher, or it's been a tackle. Those are the three premium positions in the NFL, and those guys get picked first. So you're looking at some of these other names on here that we'll talk about in a second that we may be able to write off right away. But Bryce Young, the favorite, -130 odds on. I don't think there's much value in betting him right now because things are going to shake up. We're going to see who may or may not trade up to first overall, and that's not going to change Bryce Young's odds all that much because they're already assuming that he is more likely than not going to be the first overall pick. So you can wait if you're looking to bet Bryce Young. CJ Stroud from Ohio State, he's starting to get a little bit more steam as maybe the quarterback one in this market. He showed against Michigan, against Georgia, that he is an elite passer with great poise and a lot of mobility, and that some of those questions about can he throw off platform, off schedule, yeah, he certainly can. He just really didn't need to all that much at Ohio State. So I think we're going to see his odds drop. He's at +250 DraftKings Sportsbooks right now. That may change. You may want to get on it earlier rather than later. But again, you're kind of rolling the dice with minimal information right now. Will Levis, quarterback of Kentucky. He's kind of the one that we roll our eyes at and be like, okay, first overall, really, like above CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. And I'm part of that category. Yeah. My eyeballs tell me that the other two quarterbacks are much better. But it doesn't matter what my eyes are telling me. The Colts have been really closely tied to Will Levis this whole offseason. Now, they just hired Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen as their head coach. I do think that changes things just a little bit because of what we saw with Philadelphia. But he worked with guys like Phillip Rivers, Justin Herbert in Los Angeles/San Diego at the time. So Will Levis kind of is a fit in what he's done before. This is something I actually am betting right now because when, or I should say if, and when that Colts trade or Raiders trade or other team trade comes up, I think we're going to see Will Levis's odds significantly worsen. So I think the value is maximum right now.
That's the other wild thing, too, that you have to keep in mind with betting the draft is that the team that currently has the first round pick, very good chance that they don't have that pick going into the draft because there are so many trades going on behind the scenes. So it's just another thing to factor in when you're taking a look at the draft class and the picks right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun puzzle to put together, though, for all those nerds that mock draft behind the scenes like I do. It's kind of fun to play around with that and see who has the draft capital. The Colts do have the draft capital to move up, so let's keep that in mind. The other two guys, though, on here that are not quarterbacks, Jalen Carter, defensive lineman for Georgia at +650. Like I said, quarterback, pass rusher, tackle. Those are the only positions that have been picked top first overall since 97. I'm kind of writing him off for that reason. Now, if Chicago stays put and doesn't trade this, Jalen Carter is the best player available on many boards, and I do think that that would be the pick because you can look at Philadelphia in the NFC and say, look, they completely revamped their defensive front because they drafted a game wrecker on the inside, which, funny enough, also from Georgia, Jordan Davis was that kind of game wrecker at nose tackle, and then they brought some veteran talent in around him and turned into one of the most productive pass rushes of all time. So the Bears could go ahead and do that. Again, if they stayed put, best player available, that'd be Jalen Carter. And then Will Anderson from Alabama, like insane talent, otherworldly, generational talent. I don't say that lightly at linebacker, pass rusher. He could be converted to an edge rusher, which gives him a little bit, I think, better chance at +750 of being picked overall than Jalen Carter. But again, I'm really just thinking that this is going to be a quarterback this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you that, and odds makers tend to agree with you that it's going to be a quarterback. And speaking about the quarterback, another one of the really popular markets is the first quarterback drafted. So we're not necessarily looking at the first overall drafted, but of that quarterback class, who is going to be the first one drafted. Now, again, we're seeing a lot of the same names that we're seeing in the market that we just talked about, with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud sitting atop of this board. So talk us through betting this market versus just betting first overall.
Yeah, well, if you're betting, and if you're betting like Will Levis, or if you want to take a crazy flyer on Anthony Richardson, I wouldn't. I don't think he's going to be first overall. But if you take the flyer on them to be the first quarterback drafted, you may as well pair it with them to be picked first overall, because that's really the only way it's going to happen. I don't think Houston is going to sit there and pick Will Levis over Bryce Young if both of them are on the board, or CJ Stroud, really. But in this year, it is similar to picking first overall, because I really do think a quarterback's coming off first. You look at the teams at the top of the board. Bears, yeah, they don't need one, but they're probably going to trade out. Texans absolutely need a quarterback. Cardinals are a wild card. I don't know if they'll trade out, but they probably don't need a quarterback with Kyler. Colts need a quarterback. Seahawks need a quarterback. Lions, Panthers need a quarterback. You also look at the Commanders. I've heard that they actually like Sam Howell enough to ride with him into next year, but the Jets desperately need one. That could be fixed in free agency. Raiders, possibly the Packers. We'll see how free agency shakes out. But if you're looking at the first quarterback draft, you do think that a team is going to move up into that number one position. So if it's not Bryce Young, maybe CJ Stroud, actually, with the odds at plus 200 here, I would maybe not parlay it, but bet them separately, first quarterback drafted and also the first player drafted this year.
And before we wrap up our quick NFL betting draft video for early on, any names to note moving forward that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, you talked about they're going to be expanding markets. There will be. You'll be able to pick who's going to be drafted in the first round, first linebacker, second corner, things like that. A few names that I've heard around, again, it's early, minimal information. Zay Flowers, a wide receiver at Boston College. You may find him even on predictive boards in the 40s. He's been rumored to be extremely connected to both the Patriots and the Chargers. So if that market for first round opens up and Zay Flowers is at plus money, which I think there's a strong chance he could, maybe even plus 150, plus 200, I'm absolutely firing that as fast as I can before the market figures it out. Deonte Banks, I brought him up earlier in the recording, that Mel Kiper likes him. He's kind of one of those odd men, but his draft stock is rising. I would also bet him first round if that plus sign comes up. Lucas Van Ness, I don't know where he's going to come up. He might be around even money for round one. But again, early smoke here before the real lying season gets into place, before the combine kind of ruins guys and boosts guys. Lucas Van Ness, edge out of Iowa, is someone I'm looking at for day one. And then Christian Gonzalez, a corner out of Oregon. He will be a first rounder. You're not going to get good odds. He may be minus 200, minus 300 to be drafted in the first round unless something seriously changes. But CBS reported that he may be the first corner off the board. And these are guys over Keely Ringo, Devon Witherspoon, kind of these guys that are, the de facto cornerback ones. I wouldn't totally pass up Christian Gonzalez being the cornerback one, maybe even looking at his top 10 odds once those are available.
Awesome. And as we inch closer to the draft, we will have plenty more draft betting content coming your way. Now, like we said, limited markets available right now. I was probably exaggerating a little bit when I said you'll see thousands come up on the board, but you will see a lot more as we inch closer to the draft. I am very excited for it. I believe it is kind of over closer to you in Kansas City this year. We had it in Vegas last year, and it was a very fun experience. So come back to thelines.com. Obviously, visit thelines.com for all of your NFL draft betting needs. I am Nicole Russo alongside Brett Gibbons, and we will see you next time.